At 22, life had me strapped into a roller coaster I wasn't quite sure I was ready for. Fresh out of the police academy and sporting a shiny new badge, I felt like I could take on the world. Couple that with a heart recently trampled by a breakup, and you've got a recipe for some bold, if not exactly wise, decisions. My buddy Mitch, seeing me mope around, tossed the idea of Tinder my way. "Get back out there, man. It'll do you good," he urged. Skeptical but intrigued, I downloaded the app, not knowing it would lead me down one of the most bizarre nights of my life. A few swipes right and I matched with Ava. She was stunning. Honestly, way out of my league. We hit it off right away, chatting about everything from favorite movies to our wildest dreams. When she suggested we meet up to stargaze in a field she knew, I didn't hesitate. It sounded like the perfect escape, a night under the stars with a beautiful girl to help me forget my troubles. I picked Ava up from her house on a cool Friday night. She guided me to the location, a secluded field surrounded by woods, with wildlife rustling in the underbrush and a clear, starry sky above. It was perfect, or so I thought until I noticed a pair of dim headlights far in the distance. As we settled in, the lights began to move closer, an ominous glow cutting through the night. The vehicle, a beaten-up van, pulled up, blocking the narrow dirt road we had come in on. Telling Ava to stay put, I grabbed my flashlight and approached the van. A decently sized man rolled down the window. "Evening," I greeted him, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. "Can we help you?" "Oh, sorry for the scare," he responded with surprising politeness. "I own this land. Just making sure you aren't here to hunt. We've had trouble with poachers recently." I reassured him that we were only there to enjoy the night sky and maybe catch a glimpse of the wildlife. He seemed satisfied with that, wished us a pleasant evening, and drove off. Relief washed over me as I returned to Ava, who was busy on her phone, probably texting a friend about the weird interruption, I figured. The night resumed its peaceful course for about an hour until Ava's phone lit up again. This time, the once distant headlights returned at a startling speed, charging toward us like a bull. Panic surged as I rushed us back to the car, maneuvering it into a position that might give us a chance to escape. But as the van screeched to a halt just yards away, Ava did something unexpected. She ran towards the man as he jumped out. In that split second, my heart sank. I got out and yelled for them to get on the ground, realizing too late the trap I had walked into. The man charged, knocking me down before I could react. Though dazed, training kicked in, and I managed to flip him onto his back. I saw Ava, my date, grabbing a metal pipe from the van. "They have a gun," she shouted at me, tears streaming down her face. "Just give them your money and your truck, and you won't get hurt." My cop instincts, mixed with a dash of youthful bravado, wouldn't let me comply. "No way," I said, standing my ground. The situation escalated until I revealed I was a cop and drew my concealed firearm. Shocked, they finally complied. I dialed 911, shaking as I reported 2 suspects at gunpoint needing backup. As I relayed our location, they seized the moment to flee. Against better judgment, I chased after the man into the woods. But the sound of 3 gunshots and the flash of a muzzle brought an abrupt end to my pursuit. I sprinted back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest, and peeled out of there. I drove back to where I had picked Avi up, calling dispatch again to have officers meet me there. The first to arrive were my sergeant and field training officer. Their faces said it all: disbelief, disappointment, a bit of anger, and relief that I was unharmed. They didn't mince words, calling me every name in the book, but mostly just dumbass and stupid rookie. Together, We returned to the field. The van was still there, abandoned now. My training officers ordered me to stay put while they cleared the area. What they found in the van shook even their seasoned nerves. Several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent stockpile of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what seemed to be dried blood. Inside, there was an AR-15 style rifle and 2 handguns. The scene was straight out of a horror movie. As backup and detectives arrived, they confirmed the van was stolen and the plates were fake. The blood turned out to be something else, but the danger had been real. Despite the chaos and the fear, no one was hurt, and I was left with a story that would follow me throughout my career. A stark reminder of how quickly things can go south. As I sat in the back of the patrol car, watching the detectives swarm around the abandoned van, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and embarrassment. The reality of the night's events began to truly sink in. The adrenaline rush had faded, leaving behind a heavy dose of reality and a sobering lesson on the dangers of naivety and overconfidence. My sergeant and field training officer approached the car after examining the van. They looked grave and more subdued than before. "Come on," my sergeant said tersely. "You need to see this." As I stepped out and followed them to the van, the gravity of the situation was palpable. Peering into the back of the van, the sight of the paraphernalia was chilling. Knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, and handcuffs weren't just random items. They were tools for something sinister. My FTO placed a hand on my shoulder, his usual stern demeanor softened by concern. "You got lucky, kid. Really lucky. This could have ended much worse." The makeshift arsenal was a grim testament to what could have happened if things had gone even slightly differently. It was a wake-up call, one that I would carry with me every day forward. The debriefing back at the station was thorough. I recounted everything, from the initial meetup with Ava to the final, frantic escape. The officers listened, asked pointed questions, and took meticulous notes. The incident was a stark reminder of the unpredictability of the job and the risks involved, even off the clock. The investigation continued over the following weeks, piecing together Ava's involvement and the identity of the man. It turned out that Ava had multiple aliases and was known to law enforcement in several states. The man, her accomplice, had a record that included armed robbery and assault. As the case unfolded, I found myself grappling with a mix of emotions. There was anger at Ava and her accomplice, at myself for being so easily deceived. There was embarrassment, too, knowing that I had walked into such a dangerous situation so blindly. But above all, there was an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the training that had kicked in when I needed it, for the support of my colleagues, and for the simple fact that I had survived. The lessons I learned were harsh but invaluable. Trust had to be earned, not given freely, especially in situations that seemed too good to be true. My invincible mentality was shelved, replaced by a more cautious and aware mindset. I became more vigilant, both on and off duty, understanding that the badge I wore didn't make me impervious to harm, but instead marked me as both a protector and a target. Months after the incident, as I continued my duties, the impact of that night remained. It influenced my interactions, sharpening my instincts and honing my judgment. I shared my story with new recruits, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a real-life scenario of what we might face and how quickly we might need to react. The incident also reshaped my personal life. I became more reserved, more selective in my social engagements, and yes, I steered clear of online dating. The risk had proven too high, and the scars from that night were reminders enough of what could happen when you let your guard down. Time passed, and the sharpness of the event dulled into something more manageable, something I could learn from without it ruling my life. I grew into my role as an officer with a newfound respect for the unpredictability of human nature and the complexities of the situations we face. In the end, that night under the stars, meant to be a simple date, turned into one of the most defining moments of my young career. It was a brutal introduction to the realities of trust and danger, a lesson that would define my approach to policing and personal safety for the rest of my career. And while I could never forget what happened, I could make sure it informed my future, both as a caution and as a guide. Growing up, I always shared a room with my fraternal twin brother, Alex. We lived in a modest house where space was a premium, so our parents converted the only spare room into a study for our dad, who worked as a lawyer and often brought his work home. This arrangement meant that Alex and I were roommates by necessity, not choice. I had the top bunk in our little shared sanctuary, while Alex claimed the bottom. Having the top bunk came with its challenges, primarily because I seemed to have a bladder the size of a peanut. I'd often have to navigate down the ladder multiple times a night, a journey made all the more treacherous by my half-asleep state and the need to avoid waking Alex. My penchant for drinking copious amounts of soda probably didn't help my nocturnal wanderings. Compounding this was Alex's restless sleep. He tossed and turned so much that some nights it felt like I was trying to sleep on a boat in choppy waters. One particular night when I was 15 stands out vividly in my memory, more for what happened in the eerie quiet of our room than for any sibling squabbles or typical teenage antics. It was a Friday night, and I had planned to stay up late reading, but Alex, surprisingly, had gone to bed early. Not wanting to disturb him with the overhead light, I grabbed my Android phone, climbed into my bunk, and settled in to play some games on a Nintendo emulator app, Dragon Warrior, a classic, with the sound turned off to keep the room silent. An hour into my game, my inevitable bladder call came. I carefully set my phone aside, its screen dimming to black, and climbed down. I tiptoed out of the room and down the hall to the bathroom, mindful of every creaking floorboard. When I returned, I nudged the door open just enough to slip inside, but the hallway light briefly flooded our dark room. Alex grumbled a sleepy complaint as the light disturbed him, so I whispered an apology before he quieted down again. Back in the safety of my top bunk, I noticed the blinking green light of my phone. It was a text message alert. Curious and a bit surprised that anyone would text me at this hour, I unlocked the phone. The chill that ran down my spine when I saw the message was from Alex could have frozen the blood in my veins. The text was simple: "Hey bro, I'm gonna be out late with my girlfriend. Can you cover for me?" For a moment, I thought it had to be a joke. Alex must have sent that from his bunk while I was out of the room, a typical prank. But, playing along, I replied, asking if he was messing with me. His immediate response was straightforward and chilling. "No, why would you think I was joking?" I didn't see any telltale glow of a phone screen from the bottom bunk. My heart began to pound as I texted back, telling him I had just seen him sleeping below me. His next message came quickly: "That wasn't me in the lower bunk, and if you're not joking, you need to get out of there now." Fear, visceral and sharp, coursed through me. Without a second thought, I grabbed my phone, bypassed the ladder completely, and leaped from the top bunk to the floor. Adrenaline lent speed to my actions as I flung the door open and raced into the hallway. Despite the terror urging me to run and never look back, curiosity won over. I had to know if it was just Alex pulling a fast one. I flicked the light switch by the door. The light revealed an empty bunk below mine. No sign of Alex, no sign of anyone. My breathing ragged, I approached the bunk, half expecting a face to emerge from the shadows. But there was nothing. A quick, frantic search under the bunk and in the closet confirmed I was alone. The absence of an intruder should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It only intensified the mystery and my fear. Shaken, I ran to my parents' room, blurting out what had happened. Concerned for our safety, we searched the house from attic to basement, finding no one and no sign of a break-in. It wasn't until Alex returned home later that night, as puzzled by the text as I was, that I could even think about trying to sleep again. The questions of who, or what, I had seen in the bunk below, and who had sent that text from Alex's phone when he clearly hadn't haunted me long after. Whatever had happened that night, one thing was certain. The room I had shared so comfortably with my brother for so many years would never feel the same again. The following days after the incident were shrouded in a palpable tension, not just for me, but for the entire family. My parents, understandably concerned, took extra precautions. They installed new locks on the doors and windows, and even set up a few motion sensor lights around the property. Alex and I were given firm instructions not to wander off too far from home, especially as evening approached. Despite their efforts, the shadow of that night loomed large over our home, a silent, unsettling presence that none of us could quite shake off. Trying to return to a semblance of normalcy was difficult. Alex and I went back to sharing our room, but the dynamics had shifted. The bunk beds that had once felt like a cozy, shared fort now felt like a place of vulnerability. I found myself dreading the night, each shadow and creak a reminder of the fear I had felt. My sleep was fitful, plagued by nightmares that blurred the lines between reality and imagination. Alex, for his part, seemed to be handling things better, but there was a new wariness in his eyes, a subtle shift that suggested he was more affected than he let on. The mystery of the text message from Alex's phone was particularly troubling. We had gone over it many times, turning the phone over to our dad, who scrutinized it with a meticulous eye. No trace of hacking or tampering could be found. The logical part of me wanted to dismiss it as a glitch, a freak occurrence in a world governed by codes and signals where anomalies were bound to happen. But another part of me, a part deeply rattled by the incident, couldn't let it go that easily. Determined to find some answers, I started doing some research. I pored over internet forums, read articles on digital security, and even delved into the more obscure corners of paranormal experiences shared by others. None of it brought me any closer to understanding what had happened, but it did open my eyes to a world much larger and stranger than I had known. One evening, a couple of weeks after the incident, our curiosity got the better of us. Alex and I decided to talk to some of the older folks in the neighborhood, thinking that maybe, just maybe, they might shed some light on the history of our house or the land it was built on. We spent a few hours one Saturday afternoon visiting with Mrs. Calloway, an octogenarian who had lived in the area her entire life. Mrs. Calloway listened intently as we shared our strange tale, her brow furrowed in thought. When we finished, she sighed deeply, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and nostalgia. "You know, I've always said that land has a memory," she began, her voice taking on a somber tone. "Long before your house was built, there was talk about strange happenings in these parts. Nothing harmful, mind you, but enough to make you wonder about the veil between our world and the next." She told us stories of her youth, of shadows seen in the woods at twilight and whispers carried on the wind, tales that were passed down through generations. None of it was concrete, nothing that could explain our experience definitively, but it left us with a lot to think about. In the weeks and months that followed, the intensity of that night's fear gradually faded, becoming more of a bizarre memory than an immediate terror. Alex and I continued to share our room, but we swapped bunks. Somehow, just changing my physical perspective helped alleviate some of the lingering dread. We never received another mysterious text, and no further sightings occurred in our room. Life returned to its old rhythm, but the questions remained, tucked away in the back of our minds. Reflecting on it now, years later, I realize that some experiences are meant to remain unexplained, serving as reminders of the vast mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding. That night, whatever it was that shared our room, whether a trick of technology or something more arcane, left a mark on my adolescence, intertwining fear and curiosity in ways that have profoundly shaped my view of the world. It taught me that reality is often much stranger and more intricate than we can fathom, and sometimes, all you can do is accept the mystery, no matter how unsettling it might be.